Lost Boys Invitational starts tomorrow. We got 2 qualifications left to give. Let's head on down to the feature match area and watch round number 1. We're going to be playing 4 rounds of Swiss, cutting to top 4, and we're going to have 2 winners at the end of the day, and those players will qualify for the Invitational itself. Well, we will cut down there in a second. That's fine. All right. On your right, Carl Schreiner, a.k.a. Jeebus, playing Amber Sapphire. On your left, Brad Weaver playing Amber Emerald, and we are off to the races. So these players here have already resolved mulligans, so we're going to get right to it. Kyle Schreiner going to ink a Let It Go, no 1-drop. Back Brad Weaver's way.
Right, so Kyle's list of Amber Sapphire here has a little bit lower of a curve than the list that Harlan and friends registered for the Invitational, but is more focused on the card Lantern to try to get into the middle of the curve, slightly ahead of schedule as compared to his opponents, rather than playing cards like 1-jump ahead. And there's the Lantern, and neither player had a 1-drop here, which is interesting, both players being a little more aggressive.
Yeah, well, it looks like Kyle has picked up a 1-drop, and we're going to play a Flounder. We're going to get a little aggressive and use that Lantern for ink right away. We're going to go back Weaver's way and see if he can produce a threat on 2 with no play on 1.
And we see here hitting the inkwell, Jumba Jukiba.
I don't see too many of that one.
Exactly, which just tells you exactly how focused Brad is on this 5-drop just-in-time plan. Wasn't content with just the, top tier Cusco, Mad Hatter, and Moana. Really wanted to get that 5 ink character count up, so register some Jumbas.
All right, so Flynn Rider going to come down. That powerful 1/2 does quest for 2. Very few characters do quest for 2. They cost 2, and has that Punisher mechanic. But here comes Kyle Schreiner ramping up a little bit more. Mickey Mouse Detective going to put the top card into the inkwell, and with Lantern, we are zooming.
And I think we might have just seen Kyle regret sequencing a little there. Maybe realized he had an opportunity to get a second Lantern down, but played the Mickey first instead.
I don't want to be rude or whatever, but I activate Lantern, or I fail to activate Lantern on Pixelborn quite a bit.
Yeah, these, we call them in Magic mana rocks, are a little weird. They don't really let you get free ones in Lorcana. Both Lantern and Facilier's cards are restricted in what you can do with the ink.
All right, well, we're going to play a Simba Protective Cub, and that's going to protect that Flynn Rider. Doing a great job of that, and we're going to go back Kyle's way. It's 2-1 in favor of Weaver since the Flynn does quest for 2. But Schreiner now, with the ability to knock off the Simba with a double attack, we'll see how he wants to sequence this turn. He has a Lantern in play, a Lantern in hand, so we can see, maybe a 5 or 6 drop this turn.
And one of the weaknesses when you register Amber Sapphire, like Kyle has, you do have Let It Go and Hades as interaction, but those are, more centered around the really expensive cards in the game. Amber Sapphire doesn't really have a way to deal with Simba other than getting out really far ahead of it, which Kyle didn't really do this game. But there's a pretty good answer.
Yeah, there's Phil Saties. The support mechanic does allow some of those smaller characters to chunk up next turn to be able to challenge that Simba should it bodyguard once again. And we're going to quest with Mickey Mouse Detective, because if you want to attack Mickey Mouse Detective, you know what? Go ahead.
Yeah,
he don't
works
matter.
for me.
He don't matter. All right, Brad Weaver going to ink Duke. We'll see what the play is for turn number 4. I see Mickey Mouse, your best friend, hanging out. We got a Hans Gruber going to be questing for 3 over the next few turns. And we're going to go for +3 as Brad Weaver up to 5. And Kyle Schreiner's got some work cut out for him, but Phil Sadie should help quite a bit.
And we saw Brad, Brad's now on turn 4 and didn't get an opportunity for a just-in-time, which we're kind of at the point now where you're getting less excited to draw this card that you've put 4 copies of into your deck, right? Like, still turn 5, turn 6, you can use it to get multiple characters into play, but any just-in-times coming off the top for Brad from this point on are going to be a little weaker than he might hope.
We've talked a decent amount about just-in-time so far at the Apex tournaments, but we haven't actually seen it physically cast too much. We've seen it drawn quite a bit.
Yeah,
kind of run the hand for 5
Yeah.
turns.
Exactly.
Not being inkable is particularly brutal, but so Shriner here with a lot of options at his disposal has access to 7 ink effectively with those lanterns. Can play Stitch, Carefree Surfer, or could have played the Hades that puts one of the opposing characters into the inkwell. But I feel like Philisates is going to offer up a bit of help here. Here it goes, Questin. And we're going to add strength to the Mickey Mouse. And now Mickey Mouse is going to get to rumble with the Simba. And the Flounder is going to get to challenge the Flynn Rider if Kyle wants to do that. We'll see if he wants to and what he wants to discard as a result.
Right, and we saw Kyle, not exactly stumble, but didn't use the most ink on the early turns. But really, on this turn 5 here is where you see his game plan start to come down. That was a Stitch Carefree Surfer 2 turns ahead of time, and I love that play over the Hades. For one thing, not giving Brad extra ink is going to be better in the early game, but this enormous 4/8 Stitch is really going to take over the battlefield from here on out, and almost anything that Brad plays can be answered, probably multiple characters over the course of this game, by Kyle's Surfer. So we do see a 3/6 Goofy Musketeer, which will probably take 2 characters from Kyle, or actually just a support from Phil. Let's see how Kyle wants to deal with this. And pretty good hand for Kyle. Has that 7-drop Hades we talked about. That's another clean answer to any of Brad's characters. The 3rd lantern, not exactly what you want to see, though.
All right, well, this is maybe the best I've ever seen Philisates look, right? We get to support once again and make Carefree Surfer be able to handle the bodyguard, but instead we're just going to blow it up with the Hades, put it into the inkwell, and then we're going to do some questing and maybe a little bit of challenging to knock off the Hans, but Brad Weaver is in some trouble.
Right, I like this too. The depending on whether we're supporting, what we're supporting onto, Kyle just decides to quest. Ah, I see.
That's because Carefree Surfer already big enough.
That's true. And Kyle kind of wants to use up as much willpower as possible off that Carefree Surfer. Trade for 2-3 characters if at all possible. And has really gained a commanding board position after the Mickey Detective and 2 lanterns.
All right, we got a Duke. And we got a Cusco Temperamental Emperor. Temperamental Emperor.
All right, 2 tries ain't bad. I don't know if I could do that
No
one.
touchy.
No touchy.
All right, that's one I still need to rewatch. I haven't watched that one in a long time. That one came out when I was in high school. I was like too cool for school for Disney back then.
Oh, yeah. Never too cool for
Yeah.
the Emperor's New Groove, though.
I always liked David Spade too, and when I found out recently that he was the voice actor for Cusco, it made me really want to watch it again because I could just imagine him being like, "No touchy." His little annoying voice. All right, we're going to quest for a bunch, and now it's a race versus Cusco, but Kyle Shriner, a.k.a. Jeebus, in the driver's seat. We'll go back Weaver's way and see if he's able to get anything going here, but it's difficult for Emerald because they're high quest and low stats.
Oh, what was that off the top?
Just in time, you're welcome. Classic Maui showing up just at the wrong time.
Yep, there's a combo there. Just in time into a concession. Game 2.
Number 1 goes to Jeebus, a.k.a. Kyle Shriner, with his Amber Sapphire deck, and those lanterns looking good with Carefree Surfer. Holy.
Yeah, the 3rd one was in Kyle's hand at the end of the game, but, it didn't matter. We'd already created a commanding board position, drew some extra cards. Kyle played, 7-drop, 7-drop, 7-drop on turns 5, 6, and 7. Like, that's exactly what he's going to be looking for.
All right. Well, I'm going to interact with Twitch chat for a minute while you talk about whichever of these 2 decks you'd like to talk about. So we have both the decklets at our disposal. You can go at it.
All right. I'm going to take a look at Brad Weaver's Amber Emerald deck. Amber Emerald is a pretty popular, aggressive, ink pair, mostly because of Cusco and Mad Hatter as 5-cost characters that quest for 3. And you also get to add Moana into there, even without many princesses to ready with her. But, like I said, Amber Emerald, a popular place to go, but hasn't really seen a ton of success once you start getting to the top 8s of these tournaments that we've been running here at Apex. uh, you just kind of run out of steam. You do get to play Rapunzel, even though it looks like Brad isn't. So that's what we're seeing here out of Brad is a focus on these just in times, not really caring about drawing extra cards off Rapunzel, just trying to put the pedal to the metal and get the game over with before too many of the opponent's cards start mattering.
Yeah.
But kind of, had most of a good curve there. Brad did last game. Missed the one drop, but got a two down, got the Hans down, got a Cusco down. But, Kyle's cards just combined a little better than Brad's did without that special jump from just in time, which we do see in Brad's opener here, which is where you'd like it to be, if at all possible.
Yeah. All right. Well, players here are resolving mulligans. How the mulligans work, for those of you who are relatively new to Disney's Lorcana, is you choose any number of starting cards in your opening hand to put back on the bottom of your library, and then you draw that many cards, and then you shuffle. And so there's a little bit of extra time in the shuffle bit, but you get to shuffle those 6 and 7 big rares back into your deck that you don't really
Right.
want in your opening hand. There's not a whole lot of shuffling in Lorcana, so if you just left them on the bottom, they'd rot there, and that's no fun.
Exactly.
I'm coming around to it. I used to not like it, but now I'm fine with it. All right, we're off to the races here. Game number 2 underway. Brad Weaver leads with an inked Simba. That means probably a different 2-drop going to be coming down next turn, or just has a backup Simba in hand, maybe?
Right, and I didn't see how many cards Brad mulliganed exactly, but it certainly wasn't many. So that's kind of the way you have to mulligan, especially if you have, your nut draw, the cards you're really, really aiming to play every game. It can be risky to put too many other cards back into your deck because if you don't draw enough ink, you can really stumble. So Brad decided to just protect the just-in-time plus 2-drop he had rather than try to dig for, a 1-drop uh, this game.
Yeah, I think that's a smart strat, and I think Emerald specifically has trouble oftentimes with curving because they have so many non-inkables that are at the power points in their curve at 5 and at 3, and adding just in time puts a lot more stress on that, so you have to really skip your 1-drop a decent amount so that you have ink. And sometimes you maybe even need to skip your 2-drop. It's a lot to ask for a ramp effect in just in time, and Kyle Schreiner, aka Jeebus, here, going to play Philisates, which can challenge that Simba should it decide to quest. A nice little 3 strength character.
Right, and we saw Kyle there kind of going back and forth between playing Phil and playing a Lantern on turn 2, which, ended up on the Phil. It challenges this Simba in play, and Lantern is also good later. It effectively only costs 1.
Mm-hmm. All right, Weaver going to go ahead and quest with the Simba, offering the trade with the Philisates. I'm sure Kyle will oblige. And still has to deal with the Mad Hatter, but that thing is going to quest for 3 a couple times over the next few turns, unless he has something to say about it. We'll see if he can maybe ramp up into Let It Go or something. Mickey Mouse this turn would allow for Let It Go next turn, which would be a nice answer to that ramped Mad Hatter.
Exactly. Phil, I'm pretty impressed by Phil. It could trade with the Simba if Kyle wants, but if Kyle plays a detective this turn, um, detective is a perfect pairing with Phil. It would let the detective eventually, trade with the Mad Hatter for just a single challenge, and plus a single card.
Well, now it seems like Kyle is thinking of, instead of trading with the Simba, maybe just if Brad starts questing, we can just use Phil constantly for support and use support to buff this Lilo, and that can hit the Simba and trade. And then if Weaver wants to kill Phil, he'll have to attack it himself.
Exactly. Now, we see the second just in time here for Brad, and I gotta look at his hand there. It's a third just in time plus 4 ink Hans.
Okay.
And, drawing just in times late or, past turn 3 is not ideal, but this is another kind of hand that a just in time deck could have. It looks like 3 turns in a row here, Brad is going to go just in time plus a 5, just in time plus a 5, just in time plus a 4, without even inking anything. And that's kind of a lot of resources, but if slamming that much ink on the table in the early turns is enough to get over the finish line, you don't really care how many cards you're throwing away.
All right, let's see how Kyle wants to approach this situation. He's facing down a Simba with Bodyguard and 2 Mad Hatters, which each quest for 3. So a lot of effective damage output from Brad Weaver's Amber Emerald deck. And while low on resources here, if anything challenges the Mad Hatter, he's going to get to draw some cards and refresh that a bit. So here is Kyle Schreiner. We're going to quest. It's going to go up to 1, and we're going to buff support onto the Stitch New Dog, and that's going to eat Simba Bodyguard. And now we'll see what the play is. Hades, Lord of the Underworld. This powerful 4-drop, not inkable, is usually the part of him that's a little tough. But 3/2 and can get a character back from the bin. And here we see the Stitch New Dog comes back and then gets played off the Lantern immediately.
Right, so Kyle's kind of taking a slower approach here, kind of preserving cards in hand, preserving ink, and deciding he can deal with these Mad Hatters eventually, but, you know, letting them quest for 3 a couple times could be a liability. Kyle thinks he can handle it, though.
I don't know that he thinks he can handle it. I just don't know if he has another option. But we're going to go back his way. Hans and 2 Mad Hatters each questing for 3 lore. And Kyle needs to clear, hopefully, both Mad Hatters this turn. But if he leaves a Mad Hatter, that's +6 next turn. Going in Brad Weaver's favor up to 20, and then a Cusco's lights out.
Exactly. These Let It Goes in Kyle's hand, a little bit awkward here. Brad's been skipping ink, but if Kyle uses these Let It Goes, Brad will once again be able to play almost anything off the top. There's the first Let It Go.
Yep, and that's going to knock off a Hatter, but now we can support once again with Philosades, and that's going to let the new dog attack and kill the Mad Hatter, and also it's going to allow Brad Weaver to draw a card, but most of the pressure is now gone. The Hans can quest up to 14 next turn, but it's just a 3/3, and it's going to get challenged pretty easily by the things that Kyle has in play.
This is kind of where you want to be if you're Brad, though. Not necessarily his hand, but once this Hans quests, Brad's going to be up to 14, like you said. That's just 2 quests from most of Brad's big hitters.
Whew!
And when you've drawn these Mad Hatters, you've got 4 Cusco left in the deck, and having Ward is exactly what you want when you're in this position.
You have forgotten me, Simba. Brad Weaver plays the powerful discard effect, and Kyle Schreiner is empty-handed. Can he find something off the top? Has the ability to trade for the Hans, but Weaver now up to 14.
Ooh.
It's a fight. You have forgotten me. No, you forgot me. All right. Boards are clear. It's resources versus resources, but Brad Weaver is at a significant advantage on lore. But
wow.
Cusco, Temperamental Emperor off the top.
No touchy.
Not touchy. I do think that lore totals are incorrect. I believe
agree.
Brad Weaver is at 14, so let's manually fix that in here for us, and that'll be a more accurate representation of what's happening here. I think that was a Hades drawn for Kyle, and that doesn't seem very good. And he's going to pack it in. Can't deal with the Cusco. It's going to quest unchecked twice in a row, and that's going to do it. Brad Weaver takes game number 2.
Exactly. This is a very particular weakness for Ember Sapphire. You can handle a Cusco questing once if you have enough characters in play, but without cards like Maui, Just Let It Go or Hades are not able to deal with Cusco at all. And Brad found the perfect draw at the perfect time, and the just-in-time strategy gets there.
Well, that's the primary downside of Let It Go, right? Just putting the character into the inkwell instead of the discard pile means that you can play these more resource-light strategies like just-in-time, like the more aggressive decks, and then if your opponent does interact with you, often it punishes them heavily. And in that scenario right there, that the You Have Forgotten Me right after, and then
right.
and then draws Cusco into that at 14 lore. Beautiful stuff.
And I do think there might have been a turn in there for Kyle when he could have gotten rid of one of the Mad Hatters before it was able to quest. And I don't know how everything shook out, but perhaps being a little more conservative could have gotten Kyle into safety.
All right, as these players are shuffling up here for the final game of round number 1, I'd like to thank our sponsors. We have multiple sponsors for the Invitational this weekend. The TCGplayer.com Invitational, they're our flagship sponsor. They have given us the lion's share of the prize pool to grant to our players for the weekend event. That event itself will be broadcast tomorrow and Sunday. That's a $5,000 invite-only event, and these players are playing for an invite. Thank you to Ultimate Guard. Their TCG supplies like the Katana sleeves and Archive deck box are some of the best in the industry, and we are so happy to have Ultimate Guard be a sponsor for our event. And lastly, I'd like to shout out Cards and Castles 2. Cards and Castles 2 is an absolutely spectacular game on Steam. It's free to play. It's currently in early access, and it's a tactics card battler with a really interesting resource system and a really cool combat system. We're going to link in chat to the Cards and Castles 2. You can check that out for free right now. Go to Steam, and we'll link it for you in the chat in just a moment.
All right. We're drawing up for game number 3 here. We talked a little bit about Mulligan's last game, but I'm going to be paying special attention in this game 3 to how these players mulligan, especially once you get into a game 3 position. You kind of get a feel for exactly how your opponent's build of their deck is trying to play, and you can try to craft the perfect opener. Looks like Brad pulling out 3 cards to put on the bottom, and Kyle with 4.
All right, I see it just in time on Weaver's side, so maybe going to lean into that, into a Moana or Mad Hatter again.
Well, I see 2 just-in-times. That worked out pretty well last game.
Yeah, we are on the draw this time, and we know that those acceleration type cards are often a bit weaker on the draw than the play. You're a little more set up to defend against them when you have that extra turn to play another character and another ink.
Exactly, and the 5 drops in Brad's hand are kind of some of the backups, you know, in these 2 copies of Moana. Moana has a princess-related ability that won't really come up much for Brad, so you're really just playing her for a 5-ink character that quests for 3 and, you know, has 6 willpower. But if Kyle's able to get out a good enough start, especially with Phil, Moanas are not really going to be the payoff that Brad wants them to be.
All right, so we are underway. Kyle Schreiner on your right with Amber Sapphire. And no play on 1 for either player. We did ink. Looked like a Flynn Rider there for Brad Weaver. That's usually the better 2-drop for the archetype because it quests for 2 and has a punish when you challenge. Kyle Schreiner going to ink. Let's see what he goes for on turn 2. That's a Lantern. Does he have the 1-drop to go with it? He does. Here's Stitch New Dog.
And we've seen Kyle make this play multiple times now. It's possible he's only, drawn the Stitch on turn 2, but I wouldn't be surprised if Kyle has a game plan where a lot of the games he decides to wait on playing the Stitch off the Lantern if at all possible, so that he can get more information about how his hand develops and whether he's actually going to want to use that Stitch for ink. Got to delay the decision.
Yeah, I think whichever way he's doing it is pretty smart, and if it's the waiting to see if his opponent plays something he wants to challenge, I think that's great. All right, we're going to use Lantern. We're going to shift Stitch Rockstar. This is a huge play from Kyle Schreiner. The turn 3 Stitch Rockstar threatens a powerful turn number 4, especially with Lantern. And any of those 1 and 2 cost characters will each replace themselves and draw a card. Brad Weaver's deck not well set up to deal with a Stitch Rockstar this early.
Exactly, and sure, Kyle's going to get to draw a bunch of cards on turn 4, but in the meantime, he's basically just played just in time, right? He's got a free lore quester with 5 willpower on turn 3, and might just be able to race Brad in addition to all these cards.
All right, Kyle did quest for 3 last turn, so he's up to 3. We'll go ahead and fix that. And then we're going to be back his way as we see how much damage we can do with these cheap characters. We're going to start with a Simba Bodyguard, draw a card, and we're going to exert it. So now the Bodyguard is turned on.
And Kyle being careful there to make it very clear this Simba is entering play ready and then being exerted by Stitch.
Okay, so we drew a few cards. Now we have another ink. I don't know if we have a 1-drop. I think we had a Flounder, but we played it as ink last turn, but I'm not 100% on that.
Right.
And then we're going to play Stitch Rockstar as ink. And I think we once again did the thing where we could have played Lantern, but we're trying to...
That Lantern was off the second Stitch draw.
Sure. All right. Well, we're going to quest for 3. This is going to send us up to 6 back Brad Weaver's way. We can quest a bunch too, but we can't quite kill the Stitch Rockstar. We only have 4 strength.
Exactly. This is not what Brad's deck is built to do. You can't really deal with characters very efficiently at all.
Okay, looks like we're going to be in a pure race situation. We're going to go once again just in time, this time for a Cuzco, and we're going to go attacking the Philosady. Oh, no, 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 we can't because the bodyguard. So looks like we're just going to ignore each other, and both players going to start questing. Up to 4 is Brad Weaver. Okay, back Kyle Schreiner's way. Philosades can allow for a combo kill with Simba on Simba. And then maybe we want to challenge with our Stitch Rockstar, but I don't know. Maybe we just kind of ignore what's going on the other side and deploy some things to the battlefield. Maybe try to get Hades Infernal Schemer online at some point in the near future so we can blow up the Mad Hatter.
Yeah, Kyle's getting to the point in the game where he can also get maybe as much as 3 lore onto the battlefield each turn, just as much as Brad can. And this can turn into a racing situation, and Phil also good at controlling the board, also good in the race because it gets to quest while adding the strength to other characters. So Kyle's in a pretty commanding position, I think.
Okay, I think this is pretty easy. We're going to quest and support on the Simba. That Simba likely going to challenge the opponent's Simba. Oh no! This is such a better play. So Rockstar's going to go after Simba. 2 damage on the Rockstar, and now this Simba, who is a 5, going to eat the Mad Hatter, doesn't even die. While Brad Weaver draws a card, his board position is shattered, and this was face up. And there's not a whole lot Brad Weaver's deck can do about it.
Exactly. There's the lantern.
Okay, and we can use these to play a Simba and then exert it and draw a card, so the bodyguard's turned on and we still draw. And I don't think we played an Ink yet, and we drew a Surfer for the turn, but I think we also have another 7-drop in hand, so we're just going to hold on to both of them and hope we draw an Inkable next turn.
And Kyle in, like I said, a pretty commanding position.
And that's thanks to Philosades! How awesome is that? I haven't seen him basically at all.
Definitely kind of showing its worth. None of our 3 Amber Sapphire players in the Invitational tomorrow brought Phil, I don't believe. They're a little more concerned about opposing Tinkerbells.
Yes, and Kyle is way more interested in fighting off bodyguards, which he's been using the Phil to do primarily. But here we're going to go back Kyle Schreiner's way. We got a little bit of offense deployed from Brad Weaver, quest for 3, and then we deployed a LeFou, the quest for 2, and another Simba bodyguard. And now Kyle Schreiner can race or decide to start interacting. But I do believe we have a 7-drop Hades that's going to come down here and eat the bodyguard before we go attacking and questing.
And Kyle with a great opportunity here. You love to this Simba here for Kyle only has 1 point of willpower left, but if Kyle wants, he can support onto it and then trade it off for all of a Cusco, which is an excellent value.
All right, we'll see what he goes with. He also has the ability to just ignore, play Carefree Surfer, draw a couple cards, do some challenging or do some questing. And we're going to tap 7, though. Here we go. Hades. Game over, pal. Simba down. Goes to the Inkwell.
Yeah, this is a pretty efficient turn because nothing else in play really could have effectively challenged that Simba. So now we get to take care of the Cusco. If the Stitch had tried to take down the Simba, it would have been vulnerable to the LeFou. Although I suppose not with this Simba in play.
Yeah.
But Kyle just using as much ink as possible to very efficiently deal with Brad's characters. And the 5-drop strategy for Brad not measuring up very well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just a testament to Kyle's preparedness, right? We had the Philosades, which allowed all of our smaller things to trade up into those low strength, high willpower questers from the Emerald side of things. And now we're going to go back Kyle's way, facing down another one of those characters, but we're ahead on lore and ahead on board. That's exactly where you want to be against a deck that's bad at challenging.
And here's another 7.
Carefree Surfer. We're going to draw 2. Let's get Carefree Surfer on the screen. It's such a great piece of artwork, and I absolutely love the idea of the Disney characters just, you know, going above and beyond the things that they did in the movie, doing cool, powerful things. Like, he's surfing, you know? He didn't do that in the movie, did he? I don't remember. I just watched that movie.
He got on the surfboard.
Did he?
He wasn't in charge.
He was
the
riding
ride.
along for the
Yeah.
ride. Okay. I guess that's where he got
and,
some.
and I'll say this: he was definitely not carefree in that scene.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. All right, Kyle Schreiner wins round number 1 with his Amber Sapphire deck. Brad Weaver's Amber Emerald deck not quite able to come back after the powerful exchanges from support off of Phyllis Sadie's.